Hello. So today we're going to be starting some indoor hydroponic tomatoes in our short cold day tent. I like short cold day tents because our long day plants like lettuce will never flower, and our short day plants like blackberry, white strawberry, and raspberry will flower. So tomatoes are day neutral, meaning they don't care what light schedule they get to flower. So short cold day tents are great because I can put short, long, and day neutral in them. I also am wearing the Ditch the Flock hoodie. It's been a couple years since I moved to the desert. I don't really wear hoodies anymore, so that's why we're still rocking the short shorts, but it's cold enough in these tents for me to wear them, and I kind of forgot about them. But I still have some. If you guys want some, let me know. I'll put them back up for sale. But when I moved across the country, I kind of forgot about them. They're on 100% organic cotton, and there's no pesticides or insecticides. They're printed on eConscious, and I'll link all the information like down below if you guys are interested. And if you like them, they're honestly the most comfortable hoodie I own, and I own like 20 hoodies, and that's not just saying it. Like, they feel great around the shoulders and the fabric and the material. I just don't really wear hoodies anymore. So let me know what you guys think of the hoodies, since I really like them and I think they're awesome, and I hope you guys do too. And of the tent and the setup, leave any comments you have down below. I want to be as helpful as possible. I already did 2 for a short or a reel, depending on what platform you're on, and we're going to do 2 more. Tomatoes are either determinate or indeterminate, and indeterminate keeps growing. And I grew an indeterminate for over 2 years, and it got to 14 feet tall, and it didn't really produce that many tomatoes, and I still have it. So you really want to prune them and make them only 1 main stem or 2, and top them so that they don't keep going taller. So I'm going to document me growing these and the whole process, but this is just going to be us starting them. And we might even cull them down, since there's about 4 in each bucket, and I don't want this area to get too overcrowded. So yeah, like I said, as they grow, we're going to do them into 1 main stem. Determinate typically stop growing tall and flower, where indeterminate need more of an environmental reaction to flower, so that's why pruning helps a lot. And tomatoes have 2 main types of leaves: sun leaves and suckers, that try to make an entire another tomato plant. So we're going to remove all the suckers but keep all the sun leaves, and I'll show you guys that as they grow, but I can't show you right now. We're going to start them. I'll show you the nutrient solution we're using. Why I use that nutrient solution is because I don't change the reservoirs in any of my plants, even my 3-year-old plants, and this is because I notice the pH is steady. I don't have to add any up or down, and I use reverse osmosis filtered water, so there's no contaminants from tap water building up in them, and they're temperature controlled in food grade black buckets. And I've had 3-year-old plants come out with the bucket looking sparkly clean. So yeah, I'm not telling you not to change your reservoir. It's just something I do different than the industry, and I don't believe it's completely necessary. My plants do perfectly great without it. The environment just needs to stay sterile and clean. So I use HydroGuard, and that keeps the environment sterile and clean, and turns dead organic matter like root rot, if you had any, and decomposes it into stuff your plants can consume. So in the beginning of a plant's life, I like to do 1 EC. That's the measurement of how much nutrients is in the water. So people say EC, electrical conductivity. Yes, there's a little sensor we shove in the water, about 15 bucks, and it tells you with a little electrical pulse the density of the water. And we can tell that the water is more dense if there's more nutrients in it. So 1 EC is what we like for little plants. When plants are blooming and flowering, like the strawberry, the 16 strawberry tent, just to bring it up, we have those at 2.5 EC now. And so these are going to start out at 1 EC in a 5-gallon bucket. We might not have to water them again for another 4 or 5 weeks. When we do, we're going to come back and test them, probably up the nutrients to 1.7, 1.8, and see where they're at, and continue along. And we'll document that all for you guys as well. And we have more updates on the strawberry tent coming out soon. So I'm going to mix up the nutrients, and specifically, like I said, I use those nutrients because I noticed long term I don't have to add anything but nutrients in fresh water. no up or down or tap water, and that keeps the environment very sterile and fresh and in these containers. So you may get different results if you use tap water, up or down, and different nutrients or in different types of containers. This is DWC, so we're pumping air directly into the bottom of the bucket through these air tubes. And the pump we raise above the water level of the bucket in case of a power outage. Water doesn't go back up into the pump and break it. I'm gonna make the last two and show you guys the whole process. So when I say a short, cold day tent, I mean 70 degrees, 8 hours. Where I live in the desert, 70 degrees is cold because it's normally 105 here in the shade. And the sunlight, I can't even get my thermostat out there because it breaks when it gets too hot. But on an 80-degree day, I can see it gets up to 122 in the sunlight. So that's why I can't grow a lot out here and I do a lot indoors because we're in a drought. But there's a bunch of different types of hydroponic nutrients you can use. There's 100% organic stuff like compost teas, which I want to experiment with in the future, and aquaponics like with fish. But we're using powders and minerals. So this is a blend of inorganic to organic because there's a lot of macros and micros, and you can get them in inorganic matters. So inorganic means something that wasn't alive. So like you could get salts or minerals that were from something that wasn't alive. So when you see the list, it makes a little more sense. So you want to wear a mask and gloves when you mix them up because you don't want those metals getting in contact with you. They're okay to come in contact with the plant roots because you want nutrient-dense plants. And hydroponic plants can be more nutrient-dense than outdoor plants because they have direct access and a zero root death environment to easy uptake, soluble nutrients. So you don't want to come in contact with them, but when they get uptake into your plant and it makes your plant full of nutrients, your plant is like a filter. You're able to eat your plants full of nutrients, and if that makes sense, right? So you wouldn't eat soil outside or dip your hand in any of it. But like I was saying, there's compost teas made from worm castings I want to experiment with, and aquaponics with fish. But I'm going to mix these up. The bundle is about $150 and it lasts a while. These are different bottles than that come in the bundle, but these are the exact nutrients that come in it. It's just this is a pound of Life Plus, which you don't get a pound of Life Plus in the bundle. But this is a pound of all of them. But you use 25 grams every time of dirty. So you'll go through dirty more often. So some of these bottles, like this pound of Life Plus, has lasted over a year. But dirty I go through every couple months. But I have over like 30 bucket plants. So, yeah. We're going to mix it up. No matter what nutrient bundle you use, I highly recommend HydroGuard because this cures, prevents, and solves root rot and breaks it down into stuff your plants can consume. If you do not have HydroGuard and you could use hydrogen peroxide as a substitute. It kills root bacillus, and there's bacillus in some of these nutrients, and this is a bacillus, so you don't want to combine it with HydroGuard, but it still works to keep the environment sterile. So I have a couple cracky plants without air pumps that are hydrogen peroxide with some cheaper nutrients to experiment for you guys, and a windowsill without air pumps and without a tent, because you don't need a tent. I just use the tent for the reflective surface to get more lux out of the lights, because we measure light in lux, and the natural sunlight's anywhere between 60 and 100,000, and I get around 30,000 on my plants. And indoor plants, like house plants, the reason they work under your house lights is because some house plants are okay under 1,000 lux, where for fruit plants we want like 30,000 lux. So I had the tomatoes in the humidity dome. I didn't know if we were going to re-sign the lease or not, so I didn't start them. So they've been sitting there for a little while in Rockwell cubes, which have no nutritional value, in just the RO freshwater, in 12-12 light schedule, and around 3,000 lux in the humidity dome at around 90% humidity. But it's okay if you're not in 90% humidity, and if you do a different light schedule and different lux, it'll just be a little different. Because I live in 20% humidity and I grow stuff outside of the dome all the time. And some of the stuff that takes a little longer, I start outside of the dome so that algae doesn't get the jump on it first. So I'm going to mix this up, and we're going to add 50% fresh water, 50% nutrient water, and that should bring it to around 1 EC, because when I mix this up, it comes to around 2.1, 2.2, so we have to dilute it down to 1 for a small plant. So I'm going to put all my protection on. So you use 2 milliliters of HydroGuard every time you water, and you can't use too much of it, so I don't measure anymore. And this little spoon is 1.25 milliliters. So I used to fill it up, but now I just poke 2 little holes and just splash a little bit in there, and that's about 2 milliliters. Because you can't add too much, and you add it every time you water. And like I said, that stuff is essential. So now I'm going to put on my protection, add in our RO fresh water at a 6 pH from our AquaTrue, and I'll show you what it comes out to. I do in between for all of them, so this is 4 to 6 grams per 1 gallon, so we're doing 25 grams for 5 gallons of Veg Bloom Dirty. Next we do 0.5 to 1.5 grams per 1 gallon of Stacks or Stackwell. I do in between, so 1 gram, so 5 grams for 5 gallons. Then we have Bloom Shine additive. This one's 1 to 2 grams per 1 gallon, so I do 7.5 grams for 5 gallons. Last we have Life Plus. Now you'll see this one says 1 gram for 5 gallons, but in that little note it says for microbial inoculation to use 1 gram for 2 gallons of water. So we do 2.5 grams. I actually never lower it to 1 gram for 5 gallons. I always stay at 2.5. If I go a little above, that's okay. Alright, so you can see we're at 5.7 pH, which is perfect, and 2.2 EC. So it's been about 10 minutes. We mixed up the nutrients and let any excess soot settle to the bottom of the bucket. Since I don't change reservoirs, I don't want any of that excess nutrients getting into the reservoirs. I only want liquid nutrients that became soluble in the water to go into the reservoirs, which is nice that I used one of the spare plant buckets with a long hose, because the spout at the bottom is about a ½ inch from the bottom, so we don't get any of that soot if we wanted to anyway. So I don't need the mask anymore because all that stuff has settled. I'm still going to wear the gloves when I water. But only one. Alright, so I put it on this end table so that we're above the water level of the bucket. We're going to fill it up to halfway. It may not look like it, but halfway is actually that line right there. Which it really doesn't look like it, but it's about that way. Boom. So while these fill up, I use Mars Hydro full spectrum LED grow lights for all stages of plants' growth. I actually affiliate for them and have discount codes for grow lights, grow tents, and grow kits. And we'll have a link to an affiliate page for all of my hydroponic gear I use, and any purchases directly help out the channel, so I greatly appreciate it. I personally like Mars Hydro because this other brand of lights, which I'm not going to name, the capacitors fail and blow in them constantly, so I actually put out a separate video of me fixing those. But yeah, I like the Mars Hydro because they're on a dimmer, so when I'm in here, there's no chance of me going blind, because I'm going to lower the lights down a little bit. So yeah. I like the TS1000s because I find them the best wattage for coverage and convenience, since most plants get about that size. They do 2-foot coverage, 2.5 vegetative coverage, and so that's why I'm able to do these nice rows here with just a couple of them. They're 150 watts each, equivalent to 250 watts of HPS, so they don't pull too much electricity. I put a separate video out on how much electricity I use. It varies where you live. Where I live, it's 14 cents a kilowatt in the middle of the desert, and I can't grow a lot of this stuff outside, so I need the air conditioner. Now that's a 8,000 BTU air conditioner, 5,300 seasonally adjusted, but it pulls around 300 watts. I hooked it up to my solar generator to figure that out, and an 8,000 BTU can go up to 715 watts, but I haven't noticed it go there. I noticed that when it's constantly pulling, it's around 300 watts. And I got that off my solar generator. If I had an issue, we would blow a fuse eventually. So it's a 20 amp fuse. We're only going to be able to go up to around 1700 watts before we have an issue. You don't want to run more than 80% of a circuit all day, all the time, which these are only on for 8 hours, but regardless, it's just not good to use more than 80% of a circuit. So if we went over that, we would blow a fuse eventually. So 150, 150, 150, 150, 600. And then the AC could peak at 715 if that were to happen, which is still below that number. But I noticed it at around a steady 300. I said it doesn't really raise the electric bill too much. And some people got a little upset about that. I don't think it raises the electricity bill too much. It's all pretty expensive to rent and live in the city as is, so. Also, what I like about growing plants indoors hydroponically year-round is I can keep them flowering since I control the environment. So, for my peppers, for example, they're 9 months old. I've already harvested 3 rounds of over 20 peppers off of it every time. 3 to 4 or 5 pounds of peppers. And it's not even a year old. It's going on its 4th run of peppers. And so that's what I really like about doing this too, is you get those benefits year-round, lettuce, stuff like that. And if you live in a climate that doesn't require it, you don't need the air conditioner. And you can do it in a windowsill or outdoors. So that's why I do it in a windowsill, and I do it outdoors a little bit, but in 105, 110 degree heat, it's just a challenge out there. So we added 50% nutrient water. We're going to go through and add 50% reverse osmosis filtered water from the AquaTrue, and then throw the remaining tomatoes in. This is Leica clay pebbles. A 20-pound bag fills around 7 net pots. You could use perlite, which I have a cracky perlite gourmet and arugula in the windowsill. With DWC and air pumped into the bottom of the bucket, I just worry about some of the perlite going through the holes in the net pot, so you might want to get some of the larger perlite so that it doesn't go through the bottom. You want to wash it off because it comes in a little dusty, whether you want to do that with a garden hose or under the sink. Just make sure none go down the sink or down the drain. And yeah, so I do about halfway. I like clay because they're really easy to reuse, and all this equipment lasts forever. Oh, we got a long root on that. I'm just going to lay that sideways for it. Right in the middle. So it's alright if you bury tomatoes down a little bit, because root can come out of anywhere on a tomato plant if it touches enough water. If you've ever seen those little white dots on a tomato plant, that is it trying to take root if there was enough moisture. So they're super easy to clone, and you can bury them down a little bit. I think we just buried that that little green one there, but like I said, we might have to cull them down to only a couple per bucket. Yeah, I just like how reusable all this stuff is. I've grown a lot of different plants in these buckets and with this clay. So ta-da! And that is, let's not forget, Roma tomato. Yeah, the other labels came off nicely. We'll just relabel it. To finish it off. So if you see, they're a little yellowish, because like I said, we were waiting on our lease to get re-signed. So I didn't know if I was going to even be able to start more plants or not, and if we were going to have to move out and move all the plants. So they sat in their Rockwool cube for a while, but I've had some plants sit in a Rockwool cube for 6 months. So plants are very tough. The pump is always on 24/7. It doesn't pull much wattage. We cut the tip of the hose right there so that it goes in nice and easy. And when we fill up the water, we fill it up in between these two black lines here so that it can't overflow. If you fill it up above that, it'll overflow. So let's do our last tomato. We did floradade tomato, large red cherry tomato, and tomato black cherry, and Roma tomato. I'm not sure which are determinate and which are indeterminate. Regardless, they're all getting chopped up and pruned pretty much the same way. So you could dig more of a hole and get your roots going through the bottom, but I just lay them in there. They'll find their way down there eventually, and if they do die off for whatever reason, the HydroGuard will decompose them down into stuff other roots can eat and consume. So I'm not too worried about being too fancy with it. I never have an issue. So like I was saying, we might not have to water these again for another 4 or 5 weeks, which is really nice. I'm probably going to have to hang another light above here, and I'm probably going to throw some more lettuces down in a different video for that. But this video is just about tomatoes, since I really like tomato soup. And I want more tomato soup. So just to show you what they test out to, we have 1.15 EC and about 6.5 pH. It's kind of hard to read. It says 6.6 right now. And anywhere between 5.5 and 6.5 pH is good. Some people ask why not 7. It's because some nutrients become soluble in a lower pH, and they aren't as soluble in a higher pH. So in that 5.5, certain minerals of phosphorus, I believe, become more soluble in the water. So we're at 6.5 and 1.1, and it looks pretty good. Like I said, we're going to wait a couple weeks, probably about 4 or 5 weeks before we have to water again. So we just got done setting up the 4 tomatoes and putting in the 2 lights and the new pump. I got all the electrical stuff off the ground and all the wires out of the way, so it's nice and roomy in here. One last thing I want to say about the buckets is the only part of the buckets I've ever noticed residue buildup, even after 3 years of a plant being in it, is the one part light can get in, and that's this tube. And it's usually because when they come in brand new, they have this little bit of glue right there, which doesn't actually like help it not get water out or whatever. You just want to scrape that glue off. You know, I don't like doing it with my fingers. I'm just doing it for the video right now. But just scrape that glue off from in there too, and then, or whatever it is, and then put it back, and you won't get that residue nearly as much, since that's really what starts to cause an issue. So all the plants are on a timer. We use these outlet timers. Again, like I was saying before, some plants are smellier than others. When you start pruning tomato, they make the whole house smell. They make me sneeze and itch. So it's nice to have an inline fan and a carbon filter with them to filter that out when I'm in here pruning a lot, and to not pump that out into the rest of the house. But something like broccoli doesn't smell the greatest. Some plants you don't need it, and some plants you do. When I grew oats, that's a plant you have to let die off, and the roots smell terrible. Dying roots smell terrible, and you know you have a dead plant when the root smells bad. So not all of this is 100% necessary, but I like to have all of it because I grow a bunch of different diverse stuff and make content for you guys. But just know, like I said, my setup downstairs doesn't have an inline fan or a tent or anything, and a lot of those are just in the windowsill. And yeah, there's a bunch of different ways of growing hydroponics. Just all this gear lasts forever, so I've just invested a bunch into it to have it for a long period of time where you don't necessarily need all of it. But yeah, it's all listed down below. If this is on YouTube, I have my hydroponic plants playlist where I talk about a bunch of different types of aspects of growing plants hydroponically if I didn't cover it here, because there's a lot more to cover. And if this is on Facebook, I'm trying to make a collage. If this is on YouTube, there's what's best for you, or you can subscribe and follow for more. Thank you for watching. I hope you check back up on the plants and the tent and what we got going on in here. Just to run through real quick, we got white strawberry, gourmet, blackberry, red acre cabbage, Brussels sprouts, sweet basil, again making a comeback, arugula, raspberry, 3 raspberries, now 4 tomatoes, and we're starting more soon. Goodbye.